So in the interest of staying on time, we're going to go now to Kelly Marshall and Mike Weidner's garden in Clayton. So they are on 1/4 of an acre. The gardens were installed in 2005. Kelly is a native plant garden designer and the owner of Kelly Marshall Garden Design. And this is what she started with. And this is what the garden looks like today. If you are interested in having Kelly design your own new garden, you'll find her contact information under Find a Designer on the tour's website. If you live, this is Kelly's before for the back garden. And this is the back garden now. And if you live in the Contra Costa Water District service area and have a front lawn you are ready to replace with a garden, you can get a free consultation from Kelly. Check out the Contra Costa Water District's Landscape Design Assistance Program for more information on that. So the plants in this garden can take Clayton's hot, dry summers. They also bring in, as you can see, the pollinators and the caterpillars. You can see the plant list for Kelly's garden on her garden, view the 2020 gardens on the tour's website in Clayton. Kelly and her husband put up a bluebird box some years ago after the lawns were gone. And when they did, bluebirds came in and laid their eggs. And here's a baby bluebird. 40 species of birds have been seen in this garden. Quail forage for seeds and insects. Fox and Pacific chorus frogs have been seen. To keep birds safe, the family cat is kept indoors. So without further ado, let me introduce you now to Kelly Marshall. And hello, Kelly. Can you hear us?
Hello, welcome to our garden.
All right.
I'm Kelly Marshall, and my husband on camera is Mike Weidner, and this is our garden. So we took out the lawn of our front yard in 2007, and I wanted to do a couple things when we were planning the overhaul. We wanted to be as close to 100% native as possible. So what remains in this garden that is not native is our tree. I have some succulents on the front porch, and there is a reseeding annual cerinthe that comes back each year. But other than that, everything you see is native. We wanted to be a wildlife habitat. So our garden is a certified wildlife habitat. That means that we provide food, shelter, a place to raise young and cover for all kinds of wildlife that come to our garden. We wanted to fit into our surroundings. We live at the base of Mount Diablo. We have one more house past us, and then you're on the trailhead into Mount Diablo State Park. There's a creek just a few yards away from here. And so we wanted to look like we live here, and we've embraced these surroundings instead of trying to make it look like something else. We also wanted to show the neighborhood and visitors that come by that a front yard can fit into the neighborhood with natives. And so in the front, you're going to see things a little more organized, a little more tidy. And when we go to the back, you'll see the opposite of that, because we see the back. So we do what we want back there, and we don't worry really about what the neighborhood thinks. When we did this garden in 2007, there was no rebate program, unfortunately, but as Kathy mentioned, the rebate program still continues to this day, really successful. And so if you still have a lawn and you're still holding on to that lawn and thinking about getting rid of it, I encourage you to let that go while you can still get paid back to do that. Okay, let's go on up and stop at our first spot. So I kind of did things backwards in designing this yard. I made myself a wish list of natives, and definitely everything that I could think of that I would like to try to have, and then started to figure out what worked where in terms of light, water, and size. And we'll talk about size in a minute too, because that's something that causes some gardeners trouble over time. I wanted to have good structure and seasonal interest. I wanted things that would provide texture and foliage color when things were not in bloom. We decided to divide the space. It's not a very big front yard, and the lawn just gently sloped down to the sidewalk. So my husband had the brilliant idea to put in this little rock wall here in the foreground. And that suddenly gives us an upper level and a lower level and makes it feel like it's a lot bigger than it really is. We definitely wanted to create places to go. And I'll show you a couple of spots in this garden where we go and where we sit and where we enjoy what's happening around us with all the birds and butterflies that visit. Not available at the time when I planned this garden, but available now is a really good online tool called Calscape that I use a lot in my designs to try to be more true to the site and get ideas for my projects on what plants originated there and should do well in that climate. So let me show you some of the plants in this scene, and I'll tell you why I like them. First, here in the foreground is Mendocino reedgrass. So nice and fluffy, green year round, looks good every single day of the year. I don't really do anything to it. The little plumes break down at the end of the growing season, and I'm just back to a clump of grass. Really good, interesting texture. One of my favorites, does better in filtered shade. It's a little shorter lived in full sun, but I do have it in full sun in the backyard. Up above the wall, we have our Sedum spathiolatum here, the silvery, and here. And over to the right, I have piggyback plant. So I'm using those for foliage color. We've got that almost white silver color and chartreuse, and that makes things a little more interesting in terms of shades of green. I have frilly cottage style blooms with our jelly bean pink monkey flower here. And in the foreground, not quite yet open, just starting to open, is our Cicericium blue-eyed grass. These will open as the day goes on, and then they'll close again tonight. I use both of those for kind of a cottage style. And before I was all native, I definitely, that's probably my favorite style, is a cottage style garden. And then we have some short-term thrills in here, because short-term thrills are great, but the problem with those is they're short-term. So my Allium unifolium, my single-leafed onion bulbs are currently blooming, but these are gonna, in another month or so, they'll be dying down to brown, and I'll pull them all. They'll come back stronger next year. And then far over here, I have my Lewesii blooming in the wall here. And that's one of our native succulents called cliff maids. If you saw that hiking out at the coast, it would probably be doing what it's doing here, kind of clinging onto the side of a rock. It likes really good drainage. It doesn't like frost, so I have to use it under the protection of the tree. And in our interior valley, it really doesn't like all day sun either. So that has turned out to be a really good spot for me. And when it's in bloom, it's fabulous. And then it goes back to just green foliage, and that's okay, because I go back to relying on the texture and the foliage color of other things in this garden. I'll also say above the wall, also providing really good texture, is our native California fescue here. The birds eat the seeds, so I usually wait till very late in the winter to cut down the old seeds and take those out. And every 3 or 4 years, I'll actually cut the grass all the way down to the base and let it rejuvenate. I haven't done that in a few years, so probably January, I will do that again to get these back to looking good. Okay, let's go up just briefly, and I'll show you some of the workhorses in this garden. So one of the things I always try to tell people when they come visit this garden, or when I'm consulting with them in their garden, is there is a native for every situation. So in this shot, hopefully to the right, you can see my arbor, which is my entryway into the garden. And sort of cascading over that right now is our native honeysuckle, Lonicera. That is a great plant. It looks good, green year round. Long bloom season. It gets little berries in the fall, and the birds come and eat the berries. I see the hummingbird on it quite often. And that's a great plant. For here, it gets most of the day's sun. It gets a little bit of shade later in the afternoon. To the left, you can see my focal point Manzanita. So this variety is called St. Helena. And it's been in the garden since about 2008. So it's starting to get mature. This one is in its natural form, kind of vase shaped. And over the last couple of years, I've been beginning to showcase the bark and prune it up a little bit. So the bloom season has come and gone. It bloomed in December and January, and it was quite stunning. In fact, it looked like it had snowed down underneath it. But now we are back to this beautiful cinnamon colored shredding bark and this beautiful structure. And it's really beautiful lit up at night too, if you ever drive by at night. There are Manzanitas, again, for every situation. There are ground cover forms when you just want a plain of green. One of my favorite cultivars is called Big Sur, which is a mid-size, only to 3 or 4 feet and about 5 feet wide. And there are a lot of gardens where we are lacking for space. And so we need something that isn't going to take up a 12-foot span. So the Big Sur cultivar is one of my favorites. In this garden, I use that sort of as a walled entry into the garden. If you're thinking, well, I have clay, my yard's flat, I don't think that I could grow Manzanita. They don't like water, they don't like mulch. I want to tell you that that's not really, that's not a barrier for you. The St. Helena here and all the Manzanitas in my garden have been planted high. So what I mean by that is that I mound up to create good drainage. And then I also plant the root ball above where I know my mulch layer is going to be, so that when it settles, it's even with the top of the mulch layer. And we aren't creating any kind of a basin that can capture water. Throughout the growing season, I do occasionally water my Manzanitas. They definitely look lush, long to water. And that's especially true if we come off of a dry winter. I never amend the soil or fertilize, of course. And although I use bark mulch in my garden everywhere, I keep it pulled back from the trunk of things like Manzanita and California lilac. Natives have a reputation as being hard to grow. The other thing that people tell me quite often when they tell me they want a native garden is because they don't want to do any maintenance. Natives are not always hard to grow. There are some that are very easy to get started with. And as your confidence builds, you can try harder plants. But they are not no maintenance. There are some things that are no maintenance in a native garden, but there are many things that need a little bit of care once or twice a year, whether it's deadheading or cutting back or thinning or pruning back and that sort of thing. Okay, so let's go look at one of my favorite places to sit in the garden, and then we'll keep moving. So having this big shady tree in the garden has given me a good opportunity to try many natives that like that filtered light combination. And so I just wanted to quickly show you under this tree at the far end of our property is one of our favorite places to sit. When our girls were little and played out in the court, this was a good place to sit in the late afternoon. There are not a lot of things blooming in this section of the garden right now. They've come and gone. The behind the bench is a sentinel manzanita, which I'm using as the screen to my neighbor's yard. And to the right of your screen is our California lilac called Snowball, which was a big white ball of flowers a few months ago and is now just back to green. Okay, let's go back and look at some things that are more flowery now. If you're wondering how to get started with native plants, I tell clients, and I do in my designs quite often, I just start sort of working them in one at a time to get your bearings. When we go into the backyard in a few minutes, we'll see some of what I would consider the easier ones to get started with. If you're out and about when our shelter in place lifts and we're able to go back to plant shopping again, I can't wait. Talk to the local native plant nurseries. Tell them about your climate in your yard. Let them recommend things to you. Check out Calscape. If you go on Calscape and put in your address, you can see a list of all natives broken out by tree, shrub, vine, perennial that are native to your site and that probably have the best chance of thriving in your garden. In addition, that helps benefit your local pollinators by using your local plants. Drive around, look at native gardens in your climate. see what's working for them, for other people. Check out the California Native Plant Society page on Facebook to see what others are growing and what others are having success with and what others are struggling with. There are a lot of California Native Plant Society expert people that pitch in on that page occasionally with comments, so it's fascinating to see. I mentioned before, building confidence. Yes, build courage. Try something easy, native to your location, plant it at the right time. Hint, we are heading out of the right time right now. So if you're getting close to May and on through the summer, you're better probably to wait till the fall when we are anticipating fall rains and cooler weather. And you've got to pay attention to your soil and your watering once you do get planted. Some of the pitfalls that I have found over time, you really do have to plan for the size that things are going to get. When you read about something in a book that says it's going to get 12 foot tall and 12 foot wide, and you're holding a tiny little 4-inch plant with a stick coming up out of the dirt, it really is going to get 12 feet tall and 12 feet wide. So believe the experts that are telling you what those plants are going to do. Natural is good. If you've got a mow and blow guy that comes and cuts all your shrubs into circles and squares, you might want to tell him to ease off of your native plants. Let's let them do their natural thing and let's plant them in the right place to begin with, so we aren't constantly trying to maintain the size down to something smaller. I do a lot of succession planting in both my design plans and in my own garden. And so for me, that means something that's going to take 5 or 6 years to get to full size means that I've got space in the immediate area in the short term to plant some things that are shorter lived, but will help fill in and give me some color while I'm waiting for the main thing to do its trick in the end. All right, we have to talk about zone denial here too. If you're thinking about plants in your garden, but they normally grow in Joshua tree, they probably don't work in our interior inland gardens. And so you want to be thoughtful about that. I'm guilty of it as well. I certainly have tried some things that were beautiful desert native plants that, promptly fizzled and died in my own garden. So you're better to stick to things that are more local to you in your site. And then I would say the other thing I have to remind people over and over again, and me too, we let nature do its thing. We don't use pesticides. We let the good bugs find the bad bugs and take care of the bad bugs. And we get over perfection. Gardens change day to day, month to month. Plants die. It's not your fault. It's okay. All right, let's go look at the backyard. And we're gonna cut through our Mediterranean garden to do that, but we won't stop there because we're heading on back to our native meadow. So our native meadow has been here now for, I think, 6 years. It was lawn when my kids were little, and then when they stopped using it, we got rid of it. We have to be careful because we have rattlesnakes. Definitely have had rattlesnakes in the front yard and seen other snakes pass through the backyard. And so I can't have it so thickly planted that I can't see the ground if I'm walking through there. I have to be a little bit careful of that. So what you see right now are a lot of annuals flowering. You see both the orange and the white, and there are even some pink California poppies in there. You see farther back when we get around the corner, you'll see hot pink, and that's a native Clarkia that is seeding around in my yard. There's also some milkweed in here. Let me talk a minute about milkweed too. Over the years, I have learned and come to appreciate planting only the milkweed that is native to your site. If you plant a milkweed that is not native to your site, you may disrupt the monarch's migration pattern and timing, and you don't want to do that. And I was guilty of that. I put in showy milkweed in my front yard when I was first getting started because I wanted showy milkweed. But then I read that showy milkweed sometimes stays green longer. And so it causes the monarchs to hang around later in the fall than they should. And although this didn't happen in my garden, my friend did the same thing. And she had monarchs that were forming a chrysalis near Christmas time. So we know now that that's not what we should be doing. So native to my site is narrowleaf milkweed, Asclepius vesicularis. And that is the only thing I have in my garden. And I have it out in the meadow because it is not the prettiest thing in the world on its way up or on its way down from flowering. And it's also usually covered with little yellow aphids. And I don't want to brush against it, but I just, like I said, I let things do their thing. The ladybugs eat the aphids, so that's not an issue for me. The plant dies down every year anyway at the right time, and hopefully gets out of the way before monarchs are passing through on their last route out. Also in this garden, providing really good structure in the meadow, but you can't even see it right now, I have Mendocino reedgrass, which again, we saw in the front. And I have June grass back here, which is Calaria macrantha. And then I've also got some bulbs in here. I've got a soapfruit, which is just getting ready to start blooming. And that's a super cool plant to have, but again, not fabulous looking many other months of the year. So I'm surrounding it with good texture with the other ornamental grasses. I also have blue-eyed grass in here, which is a beautiful bulb that looks like a clump of grass and has pretty little purpley blue flowers. Those will, as long as they get water, they will bloom into the first part of the summer. Usually by Memorial Day, I'm ready to cut those down to the ground, and then they start all over again, and I get a little less vigorous second bloom in the fall. But they're good structure. They seed around a lot. I actually have to pull them from places I don't want them, but they help fill in and make it look kind of grassy and like a meadow as well. Okay, let's go on around. As we're walking, I'll tell you in the glimpse of your screen, my upper tier of my retaining wall is all native, except for the cypress at both corners, which were there by the previous owner. And my lower level is about 50% native, sort of a mix of natives, native Penstemon, native Artemisia, and then globe mallow, that sort of thing. And then I've got some other non-native flowering Mediterranean plants that I'm, personally drawn to. Okay, so here in our sort of last stop of the garden, I wanted to show you a couple of easy natives if you're just getting started that you would perhaps like to try, and I'll tell you why I like them. Here in the first shot is our native Foothill Penstemon. This is Margarita Bop. Really good pollinator plant, both for hummingbirds and bees. Can do hot sun, also doesn't mind filtered shade, which is what the one in this location gets. A lot of bang for your buck with all three of the plants I'm about to show you, including this one. Long bloom time, quick growth. I just put this one in the fall, but these will begin to decline over 3 or 4 years and kind of fizzle out. And that's okay with me, because either I'll put it back in again because I really like it, or I will change it out to something else. Next to this is our native monkey flower. This one, hybrid, is called Pamela, named for my mom, Pamela. I really like monkey flower. These do best in filtered shade or morning sun and afternoon shade. I really like this one because it blooms pretty much till we get to our first frost. Very showy. We had our native checker spot butterfly lay eggs on this guy, along with some other plants in the garden this early spring. And so we had checker spot caterpillars like crazy. I probably couldn't even count all the caterpillars we had. We had several hatch, and we were able to see them right after they hatched. And it was just spectacular to watch them come to life. And now, as a result of that, as the afternoon goes on here, I usually have several checker spots floating around in the garden, stopping at different things. And then last but not least is our Lilac Verbena, Verbena lilacina. This is from the Channel Islands. So if you live in a really cold East Bay location, frost will definitely knock this down a little bit. I go back and forth. This one, because it's a little bit protected in my garden, didn't get hit as hard as my other one that's out farther, completely open in the space. But I love this one because it's full size, usually within a year or two, 3 feet, 4 feet tall, could be 6 feet wide if it's really happy, covered with blossoms until we get frost. In fact, kind of a pain to deadhead, but doesn't really like to be sheared. So you've got to deadhead it. So what I say is, what I tell my clients is, I'm going to put one in your garden, get a glass of wine, go out after night and start deadheading, cleaned up and keep it looking good. It smells like jasmine when the sun hits it, and the butterflies love this guy. So I have lots of action with both swallowtail, monarch, and checker spots stopping here for a drink. So that is one of my favorites as well. And if you're just getting started, I highly recommend Lilac Verbena, the monkey flower in any color that you like. These come in all warm colors and tones, white to red, basically. Or our native Penstemon is another good one to get started and start to build your confidence so you can start building your palette of native plants in your garden. And with that, I think I'm finished. I want to thank you for joining us. Kathy, do you have any questions for me?
Not, unfortunately. In the interest of time, we'll have to move on. But Kelly and Mike, thank you for showing us around your garden. It's beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good day.